to India and Ireland, round Africa and back again. We don't really need to know just where we'll go. Maybe Canada, then to Brazil, then through the Alpine foothills. All I really want to know is, can we go? Oh baby, can we go? Round and around the globe.
Welcome to Take Me With You, episode 117. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Cheryl. We are two well-traveled people who want to go everywhere.
But that's not going to happen. So instead, we'll travel vicariously by inviting a guest to share their unique travel stories with us.
Today, we're talking to Hilary. Hilary has lived in Paris for the last 5 years, but she's from the Seattle area, and she and I just found out that we went to the same elementary school, so I am stoked right now. And also, what kind of life projection needs to happen for me to get on this Paris path as well, because these are exciting things that we can be talking about, or interview Hilary, whatever. Welcome, Hilary.
Thank you guys so much. It really is a small world.
I know, I love it. So Hilary knows friend of the show, Hilary Holman, who has been on the podcast, and she's been on, I think, just once, but we mention her sometimes, and so such fun travel connections. We're so excited to have you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, and this is my first podcast, so I'm really excited to share my story with your audience first.
Yay!
So good.
Well, I'm really curious about this whole trajectory to living in Paris thing that Cheryl apparently wants.
It's a good starting place. So I am from the Seattle area. I went to the University of Washington, and from there I just looked in my own backyard and started working with Amazon. And I graduated in the middle of the financial crisis, so I was super thankful to have a job, much less with such a big, amazing company. And so I got on that roller coaster of a ride, and I ended up working with Amazon for almost 10 years. And that's how I moved over to France, was transferring with my job at Amazon. So I had an incredible run there, but in my last role, I really wasn't passionate about what I was doing. And the company had also grown so much. Just to give you some context, when I started at Amazon in 2009, there were 25,000 employees worldwide. And when I left in the fall of 2018, there was over 600,000 employees. So
Wow.
massive. And I'm so thankful that I saw that growth during my 20s, and I kind of consider it like my first career. But by the end, I felt like I felt sort of lost of being like this tiny little piece of this huge machine, and I was kind of losing track of what my contributions were and what my impact was. And I wasn't passionate about it, and I wasn't fulfilled anymore. And I had an amazing experience. So I was like, okay, it's time for the next chapter. So I left, and I took some time off to think about what I wanted to do. And I knew that I wanted to stay in Paris. My boyfriend had moved with me out here. He was working for a French company, and I love, love, love living in Europe. And it was always my dream to be in Paris. So I had that piece kind of figured out. And then I had also had in the back of my mind the idea of going to an MBA program. And there's a couple very, very good MBA programs close to Paris. And so I looked at those two programs, and I found one that focused on, or that gave me the option to focus on entrepreneurship and also sustainability. And that school is called ATC Paris. And so I applied to that program, and I started in January of 2019. And in the middle of all this, while I'm waiting to hear back about if I'm going to get into school or not, I kind of did this fun self-discovery exercise where I got out a bunch of Post-it notes and I wrote down all the things that I was either good at or that I liked doing or that I thought I might want to do in the future to help me figure out what this next step would be and how the MBA could possibly help me get there. And the very, very first thing that I wrote down on these Post-it notes, which I still have to this day, was ecotourism. And then I also had Post-it notes that said launching stuff and data analysis and helping people and saving the world, all these different. So I kind of could step back and look at all my Post-it notes and say, okay, how could I do something that is a blend of my passions and also that keeps me in the business world and is going to be something that I feel really good about. So as I went through the MBA program, I was thinking of the entire time of like, how can I make an ecotourism business? And that evolved into this idea of sustainable travel. And what does that mean? And how do you build a social enterprise for-profit business model out of that? And, you know, a year and a half, 2 years later, here I am with Yūgen Earthside.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's all you got to do, Cheryl.
Okay.
Work for Amazon for 10 years, you know.
Cool. It sounds really like easy. Yeah. And then like the Post-its, but like probably just like, I'll probably just copy what Hilary wrote on her Post-its for mine, you know, because I might like skip a step, you know. So.
Wow.
Paris, go get some wine, some baguette.
Okay. So we have a lot of questions, but I do need to ask you if you've watched the Netflix show Emily in Paris and what you think about it.
So I started it. I got through 4 episodes. I probably will finish it at some point, but it was taking me a long time because I was kind of going through and doing sort of true false fact checks based on my personal experience. So of course everybody has their own experience, but some of the things that Emily in Paris portrays are so true, it is not even funny. And you're just watching that like, yes, I lived that experience. Like, this is so weird. And then other things happen and you're just like, that is BS. That will never happen. You know, like, you don't just go walking around and like make friends in the park. And so I was going really slowly because I was using it as an opportunity to reflect on my move here. And, you know, I had a lot of people reach out saying that they thought it was hilarious and relatable and they enjoyed getting to know that part. And I had other people, like friends in Paris, being like, oh, but I actually did meet somebody in a park. And I'm like, congratulations, you are one out of like 100,000. Like, this is so rare. So I probably will watch it. I probably will finish it at some time.
That's so interesting because I felt like, oh, this is all just so fake, you know, but also like I've never moved to another country. And so I am curious, like, what could you relate to? What was similar compared to the show in your experience?
I think anything that indicated how hard it was to move here, I related to. I think, well, and also I'm not sure even what the word is. One thing I've noticed since moving to Paris is I really feel like my English vocabulary has gone down in not a great way. But kind of this aspiration of like, oh my gosh, this beautiful romantic city. Like it is all of that, but it's also gritty. You know, there's also a lot of things that aren't shown on TV that don't fit that kind of romantic, beautiful, picture perfect mold. And especially in the context of working in another country, blending with colleagues that, you know, don't speak English as a first language. They can, but a lot of them, like, quite frankly, they don't want to, and they prefer to speak in French. And so when I first started, there was this big kind of like disconnect between I was learning French, I knew some French, I was learning French, and I wanted to be better at French, but it wasn't at the level where I could like operate well with my colleagues and with my whole team. And they would speak English, but then I would feel bad about it. And, you know, and so there's some of those like sticky situations where you want to fit in so badly, but it's really, really hard. Like a lot of people in France, they're very close with their families. They separate work and life a lot. So like the happy hour culture where you're friends with your coworkers and you go out for drinks at the end of the day, I didn't find that a lot, at least in my office and with my team. And of course, I feel like keep layering on disclaimers that this is just my experience and tons of people will have different experiences. But when Emily in Paris was like having trouble like understanding the French and feeling like she was just not fitting in, like not getting invited to lunch or not, you know, kind of being made fun of in like these playful ways. But I always felt like an outsider in the office. So, you know, for me being an entrepreneur, I get to live in France and I don't feel like an outsider because I build my own circle, my own team. So that part.
I thought it was really interesting how they show, like her speaking so much English in the office because it feels like, did this whole office just like switch to English now? I'm like being an English speaking office compared to like a French speaking office. And obviously that's for the show so that the viewer can understand. But I thought it was so interesting, like the idea of being in the workplace in a different language compared to trying to find the Eiffel Tower in a different language. You know, those feel like very different things.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's super true. And I mean, I remember going to trainings where, you know, my colleagues, they did speak English, but sometimes, you know, we would have an external party come in to do a training and they don't speak English, or they're not used to presenting the training in English. And especially when there's a room of 10, 20, 30 people and you're the only person who doesn't understand, you know, it doesn't even feel fair to say, oh, switch to English. And on top of that, I'm the one that chose to move to France. I'm the one that wants to learn French and like learn this other culture. So it was just harder than I could have imagined, you know. So, but great experience, good learning experience.
Wow.
So I'm curious, like hearing that experience, I would love to hear some advice, both for like if someone's going to move to another country, but also for people who live like wherever they grew up, but have a coworker who moved from another country. Like, how can we be welcoming to coworkers from other cultures or other languages? And then if someone's thinking of moving somewhere where they speak a different language or just a different culture, like what advice would you give in both those situations?
Yeah, for sure. My number one piece of advice to somebody wanting to move to another country who's going to work there would be to learn the language. And I honestly, in retrospect, I wish, even like Amazon, I thought it would be like easier transferring within the same, you know, huge global company. But I wish they would have made me do a language test and like prove a certain level of proficiency before moving over, or like pay for classes for me to get to that level before coming over. But I think like that would have helped the integration so much in terms of being able to understand and communicate. So even if your company is not offering that or doing that, I would say that's something that you as an individual can and should do. Like if you're serious about wanting to integrate and to make friends and to be able to work in a professional setting, it's like learn as much of the language as you can. Even if companies say like, oh, everybody speaks English, there is a huge difference between knowing how to and then wanting to and choosing to, and then all of those other situations that you might find yourself in with vendors, suppliers, trainings, meetings, etc. So that's for people that want to move. For people that are speaking their native language every day and they have a coworker who's foreign, who comes, I would say like be welcoming, which is it's super basic, I know that, but it goes a long way. And when you move somewhere and you really don't know anybody, it's just a very, very isolating experience. And so there's the one hand of like just being friendly, making sure that, you know, people are included and seen, etc. But another of like informing them of like little local or office traditions or like things to expect, because I had so many situations come up where I would get a piece of mail and I like wouldn't know what to do with it. And I would find out, oh, well, that's just normal tax that happens. Okay. But there's so many things like from like a life admin perspective that when you move somewhere, you don't really have anybody to like explain it to you. So even just reaching out and saying like, hey, do you have any questions? Like, do you need help communicating with your doctor, with your bank, with your phone company? Like if something at your house is broken, do you need me to talk to the plumber for you? Like all those things. It's just, you know, life is so much more than just, I don't know, maybe a better way of putting it is living and working somewhere is completely different than being on vacation there. And all those things that you kind of take for granted that you know how to do as an adult, or that you're figuring out how to do as an adult in another country in a foreign language with nobody to explain it to you or tell you when you're going to be, you know, late with something. It's a lot to juggle. So I would say like reach out, be that support network for people that might not have it otherwise.
So it's like being on vacation in another country is like being a kid in that country, and then living there is like being an adult in that country.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have responsibilities as much when you're on vacation. And like just quick personal example, I've been here almost 5 years, and I just found out a few days ago that I was 6 weeks late with this random payment that everybody in France has to pay if they have a TV in their house. It's called the audiovisual tax. Doesn't matter if you use your TV. It doesn't matter if you pay for cable or not. just if you have a TV, you have to pay this tax. I paid this tax for all the other years, and still this year I was late because I turned on paperless and I missed the email from the French tax authorities. So I had to go in person and pay it online, or I had to go in person because I could not pay it online because I now had a late fee, and I got everything cleared up. But it's like, even living here, even having paid this stupid tax 5 times, you still make mistakes. And so, it's so much more confusing at the beginning when you don't. It's so much more confusing at the beginning when you don't know what to expect, and you're not sure what's normal. You're not sure if you're getting scammed. You're not sure, if these amounts are exorbitant or just run of the mill. You just don't have any reference points. So I think it just takes a long time to kind of get your feet under you.
That's really well said. And
wow.
Hilarious that there's an AV tax.
I mean, why not? You can tax just about anything if you want to, right?
And in France, they do. They tax you for as much as possible. So
really?
Yeah, France has extremely high taxes. But I mean, they go to a lot of different programs and uses. Healthcare here is amazing. Public transportation here is amazing. So, it goes towards stuff, but it is such a switch from, America, where it's a very, very capitalist society. That's really what it's founded on. And France, it veers a lot more towards socialism. So, you have really, really high taxes, but you're also pretty well taken care of as long as you're current on all your taxes.
Yeah. I'm sure that we could do an entire podcast just on those differences. Because that's especially for people who live and grew up in the United States, it's just a very different way. I think European in general, I don't know specifically about France, but I know a lot of European countries tend that way, like you're describing there, Hilary. So that's very interesting. We do have 3 questions that we like to ask all of our guests. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you those, and then we'll get into the bulk of your travel story today. So the first question is, why do you travel?
Oh, I travel for so many reasons. I think the number one thing is that I really think it's in human nature to explore. And I know there's so much to see. So I think that just exploratory, internal drive of just there's so many things to go out in the world and see is a big part of it. I think the more I've traveled, it's kind of opened me up to some of the other ideas of how important it is to see people different from yourself, to understand different cultures, especially living in France, seeing a system that works so differently from the U.S. and seeing it work. The healthcare, the education, there's so many huge things that work just fine here, and it's done in a completely different way. And I don't think you can really fully appreciate or internalize how powerful that is unless you go see it. And then another thing that's come from all my travels that sort of continued to fuel the desire is this planet is so cool. The fact that there are glaciers and salt fields and volcanoes and deserts, and I mean, the geography of the world is just amazing. And I think, hopefully most of your listeners will also appreciate, taking care of the earth, and that's becoming more important than ever. And I really strongly believe that you need to see things in order to care about them more and to believe that things are happening. So seeing to appreciate, but also seeing so that you're motivated to take action and, help preserve everything.
That's a good point.
You're getting me excited. You're speaking my language. So I don't know if you know, I'm a high school science teacher. So ecology, we're actually just wrapping up our ecology unit in my biology class right now. So yeah, those things are definitely things that resonate with me.
There's an example that I use quite frequently about traveling to Iceland maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and we went out to go see the glaciers, and they were quite literally melting before our eyes. We were watching them drip, drip, drip. And, being from Seattle, being quite liberal, I already believed in climate change and global warming. I already donate to causes that are fighting this. But it hits different. It really does when you go see a glacier and it's just nothing there. And I think it was a really powerful experience because, you know, I already believed in climate change, so it added on to that. But imagine if you didn't believe in climate change and you can go see these things like disappearing before your eyes. I think it might help inspire people like, okay, this is real. We need to act, you know, yesterday. Needs to be high priority.
Yeah, definitely. Second question, what type of traveler are you?
I would say, I'm not sure like what category to put it in. But most of the time I like to come up with a few top things that I want to do in a destination and leave the rest to be spontaneous with. And I'm almost always traveling with my boyfriend, my significant other. And so our kind of routine is that we'll pick a place and we'll each kind of come up with our list of like what are our top three things. And usually there's overlap between our top three. And so that combined list will become what we really set out to do. And everything else we just consider, you know, is gravy on top. Like if it happens, it happens. We're not going to be heartbroken. And I think it's important to, well, I'm a structured person, so I like that. But I think it's important to leave time for openness to do things that you might not expect, and also to help you slow down and travel in a little bit more of a leisurely way where you're really getting to know and getting to do a few things on a deeper level instead of trying to cram it all in, because you can't see any place in just a few days. Like you can't come to Paris and see it in 4 days or 7 days or whatever. You can see more and more, but I think focusing on what you really want to get out of that experience, putting your energy towards that, and then letting the rest kind of evolve around that. I think that, I mean, that's how I travel. That's the type of traveler I am.
And then that's good. I want to follow up a little bit with that and ask, do you see that the way that you travel has changed since you started living in a different country?
Oh, definitely. Well, since living here and then also since starting Yūgen Earthside, since living in Paris, we take so many more train trips than flights. Like the trains far outweigh flights because you can. And that's something that's just really lucky about being here is like you can take a train for 3 or 4 hours and you can be in a different country, speaking a different language, with different regional food, with different local weather patterns. You know, you can really feel transported. Whereas in the U.S., if you take a 4-hour train ride, you're like probably in the same state. You know, everything kind of, all the accents are the same. So train travel for sure. And let's see, another thing that's like changed recently about being over here is we've been getting into staying at apart hotels, which are like kind of blends of apartments and hotels. And we do that so that we can like make more of our food in our rooms and kind of like save money that way. But also just like not, I guess it is about saving money. You know, like we'll have breakfast and coffee at the room. And then when we go out, we're good until lunchtime. So kind of like stretching our travel budget that way. I think that was only the first
I feel like that's a good way to save money, but also I feel like there's times when if you feel forced to go out for 3 meals a day, it can feel almost like resentful to have to go out for that meal sometimes. If you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm hungry, but I'm in pajamas, but I guess we're going out. You know what I mean? So it's like the idea of kind of still getting to be a little bit at home or like do your own breakfast or things like that, I think can feel like you have more freedom sometimes too when you're traveling.
Well, we also just like love food. And so for us, again, like speaking to our travel style, eating is a huge part of it. And we'd kind of rather spend more money on like a nicer meal that is going to be really good and that we're going to really remember than spending, you know, money on 3 meals a day, for example. So, you know, it's all about picking and choosing what's important to you when you're out.
Totally. Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say Cheryl's definitely a foodie, so
Yeah.
I know she's gonna be right there with you.
Yeah.
I'm much less of a foodie, but even with that, I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but the experience of going into a grocery store in another country to buy that food, I find incredibly exciting and fun because they're the same and yet they're very different. And it's a little window into that daily culture that you often don't get when you're traveling. So I think that's a really good a good way to kind of approach things when you can. I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit more about these, what did you call them? Apart hotels? Is that what it was called? I've never heard of that before.
So it really is kind of a blend of an apartment and a hotel. And so it'll feel kind of like a hotel, but just like with a little kitchenette. And so most of the time when you're at a hotel, you'll have like a little mini bar, like a tiny little fridge that you can't really do anything with. But there's only one sink and it's in the bathroom and there's no like counter space. And so apart hotels, they'll just have basic dishes, basic dish soap. They'll probably have a coffee machine. It'll usually have coffee pods with it, or you can like bring your own. But it's just been really great because even when we have like leftovers from a restaurant, we can just take it back and put it in our hotel and then have like real dishes to eat on. And I don't know, it's my like lodging situation has been evolving because I used to always stay at Airbnbs, and I personally feel like the value for money of what you get with Airbnb has really gone down. And we started finding that it's not actually, it used to always be cheaper and like a lot of times nicer than another option. And now
it's not always. I agree with you.
No, it's changed. I mean, the company's gotten bigger, so it makes sense, but it kind of got to this point where we were looking at Airbnbs where normally you do have a kitchen, and the prices, like, they weren't that cheap and they didn't like look that nice. And so then now we compare the Airbnb prices to apartments or apart hotels, and apart hotels are usually cheaper. I mean, they're not like fancy affairs, and we started finding that these things called apart hotels was this category that really fit what we were looking for in terms of having our own space and having more than just like a bed to sleep in. And they're usually nicer than Airbnbs because they do have, like an entryway and a receptionist. Like they have a little bit of that hotel feel, but it's more independent. And so we actually just got into those this summer. So I'm a big fan.
So if I were to just like Google it for wherever I'm going, is that like a common term that's in a lot of countries? Have you found as you've been looking into them?
It could be. I mean, I just kind of discovered them. So we spent the month of August remote working. Like with COVID, we were obviously locked in our apartments all summer. But in France, in the summertime, things were relatively calm. And so we rented a car and drove along the southern coast of France. And we would just pick places to post up for like, I know, my life is really hard.
I love the south of France. It's so beautiful. I'm so jealous right now.
It's our favorite place. And so we spent 4 weeks, and we just picked one place for basically each of the 4 weeks. And so that's how we got into these apart hotels, is because we wanted to be able to post up and basically not leave our apartment. We wanted to have like good Wi-Fi and air conditioning and a way where we could make some of our food because we were going to be on the road for a month. So we just discovered them this summer, but then we took a couple of short little train trips over the weekend to other places in France and found them really easily. So yeah, I think if you type in apart hotel, APART hotel, it'll come up, and
cool.
I don't know, my new favorite discovery.
That is such a good tip. I love it.
Yeah, it really is. So, and I mean, we could use that as the answer to the last question, or I have a feeling you probably have even more great things. So the last intro question is, what is your number one travel tip?
I think my number one travel tip would be what I was mentioning earlier about picking your top priorities and really not trying to cram it all in, which all circles back to this idea of slow travel, of like, how do you see, what's the phrasing that I even want to say? like not Instagram travel, like not just going from point A to point B to point C and taking a picture and then leaving, but how do you just pick what is going to like kind of bring this culture, this part of the world, this nature, like what's going to bring this to life, and how can you pick a few things that are really, really going to stand out to you and stay with you instead of trying to cram it all in. And I think the best way to do that is to just pick your top three and then let everything else happen from there.
Mm.
Yeah, I know, Cheryl, you've kind of shifted to that a little bit, haven't you?
Mm-hmm. I used to go pretty hard, though. I would try to get through a big old list while traveling. And, I like the flexibility now of not having everything booked. I want to know what I need to have booked and what I need tickets for, or, things like that. I want to know the information, but, it is nice to get to a place and then choose how long you're going to spend there too. And because there are some things that are like, oh, I got through that museum in 30 minutes and I thought it was going to take me 2 hours. So there's like the flip side too, where sometimes you spend less time or something's just not as cool as you thought it was going to be. And you're like, I'm good. I saw enough of it. So it's kind of nice, the flexibility on either end of more or less time at something. And then having that time in between where you're not rushing to the next thing, but just like, we have nothing else planned today, so let's see what happens and just explore is really fun.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, Hilary, I feel like we've already gotten so many nuggets of wisdom from you. This is great. And yet we haven't even gotten to the bulk of your episode yet. So what travel experience are you going to tell us about today?
So what I would like to talk about is sustainable travel. And within that, I have just recently launched my company, which is called Yūgen Earthside. And we just launched 2 weeks ago. So we're a brand new little baby company.
Yay!
Champagne was popped. It's been a fun few weeks. So this is really like my passion project, my brainchild, the culmination of a lot of years of thinking and dreaming and work. So yeah, with sustainable travel, I don't know, have you guys heard of this before? Is it something that you're familiar with about, or that you think your listeners are familiar with?
Why don't you go ahead and just define it for us as you would define sustainable travel? Because I think, especially with a word like sustainable, it's kind of a buzzword these days. So it can mean different things to different people. So for you and your company and your priorities, what do you see sustainable travel being?
Yes. Great starting point. So to me, sustainable travel is really about 3 pillars. The first is taking care of the natural environment where you're traveling. So you can think of like the leave no trace mentality. The second thing is about preserving the local cultures the second thing would be preserving the local cultures and societies. So making sure that you're not being a part of any type of cultural appropriation, that you're being respectful with your dress, your habits, your hand gestures, everything like that. And then the third thing would be promoting the local economy. And what this means is really keeping money in the destination where you're visiting. And this tends to be a bigger problem for island states or island nations, where they have to import so many things, and they might be part of a conglomerate that is owned by a company that's not on that island. And so then you have this term called economic leakage, where the money, you're going there as a tourist, but most of the money is not actually helping the local economy. So sustainable tourism is about those 3 things: protecting the environment, supporting the local societies and cultures, and promoting the local economy. And I'm glad you asked about that, because if people recycle at home, okay, yes, that's sustainable. But I did a lot of surveys asking people, what their thoughts on sustainable travel were. And one of my friends, he wrote in the survey, he's like, oh, does this mean like staying at hotels that don't do single-use plastic, like bars and soap? I was like, yeah, that's one tiny part of it. But it's really just one tiny part of it. It's so much bigger than single-use plastic. But everything can kind of be grouped into these buckets of environmental, economic, or sociocultural.
I like that. I hadn't thought about that before. When I hear sustainable, I think of your first pillar mostly, right? Just the environment and taking care
Yeah.
of that. But I love that it means more than that to you, and also sustaining the cultures and the local economies, because I mean, if we want to continue to be able to travel to these places, we need to support the people who live there. To otherwise it's not really, it's just going to be like going next door or going down the street if it's all the same. And
Yep.
that's
Or
not
like Disneyland, where it's like no one lives there. I mean, Disneyland is fun, but it's like this is not like a natural like community or culture. It's all manufactured. And I think there's places sometimes that we visit that have become so touristy that like, is it like, does anyone live here and have a life here and is from here anymore, or is it just tourists flocking there to see the things? So I love that. I think that's such a really good point.
So I'm curious about the name of your company. I think you said it was Yūgen Earthside.
Yeah, you got it. That's right. First try.
Okay. So what is Yūgen? Where does that come from? What is that must have some meaning.
It absolutely does, yes. And part of the thought process with this word, with this name of Yūgen Earthside, was that people would ask about it. So thank you for falling into my trap. But Yūgen is a Japanese word, and the definition is a little bit of a mouthful. So it is an awareness of the universe that triggers an emotional response too deep and powerful for words. That's a lot. So
Okay, you're going to have to say that one more time.
yeah, I know. So Yūgen is a Japanese word that means an awareness of the universe that triggers an emotional response too deep and powerful for words.
Huh.
And I love this word. First of all, Japan has been one of my absolute favorite destinations and trips. So there's a little bit of a special connection there. But it's really, there's so many Japanese words that just capture these huge, profound ideas that you can't say. It takes 20 words in English to convey the same thing. But I just love it so much because that is, when you ask about why I travel or like what type of traveler I am, a lot of the responses go back to like, this planet is just so freaking cool. And like, it really does fill me with inspiration and with awe and appreciation. And I just like love it. And it's really, it's always astounding to me when I see usually a new thing in nature where I'm like, how are we still on the same planet? And like, this is here and this is here. And it's so pretty and it's so fascinating to me. And I think hopefully when people are traveling, in the right way or in a meaningful way, they kind of have that sense of wonder, like, oh my gosh, this is so powerful. This is so cool. How do I take care of this? That's like, that's the next part is like, how do you turn that emotion into action and doing something positive for this planet? And then that kind of leads us to Earthside. Earthside, it's partly to convey Earth as the destination. Like, that's not just focused on one place, one monument, one country, but also there's been so much divisiveness in the world lately, and so kind of a reminder that like at the end of the day, we're all Earthlings, we're all humans, we're all here, and there's so much of our planet to see. So it's, to me, kind of this unifying word of like, let's think of Earth as the destination, and let's treat it as a destination as well as our home. And how do you kind of think about that when you travel? So those are the two words. And the last thing I'll say is that trying to come up with any type of business name about sustainable travel, it's all taken. Every single thing is taken. So in terms of buying a website domain, in terms of being set up for good SEO results, in terms of having it be memorable but unique, but able to say it and read it, and it was actually quite challenging to come up. We had a lot of name changes. So Yūgen Earthside is the one that finally stuck. And I said, yes, okay, this captures it. The domain is available. Let's go.
And it's going to look good on a beanie. So, that's important as well.
Actually, my biggest qualm with it is that the initials are YE, me. And I can't help but think of Kanye's brand Yeezy, and I don't like that part. But so I try not to abbreviate it if I don't have to, and just keep it Yūgen Earthside, because otherwise I just say Yee.
That's funny.
That
you know,
is
I
really
mean,
funny.
he might become a brand ambassador at some point for you. So, like, we don't know what's going to
There you
happen
go.
here.
It's true.
Never say never, I guess.
What does your company do? So you're a sustainable travel company. What do you do? Why would people come to seek you out, look at your website, do any of those sorts of things? What is it that your big dream is driving towards?
Yes, love this question. So my big dream is driving towards making travel and tourism more sustainable. And so as we talked about, that means not just for the travelers, but for the communities and the natural environments that people are visiting. And the way to explain what Yūgen Earthside does, we are a sustainable travel booking platform. So most of your listeners will probably be familiar with other booking platforms like Booking.com or like Kayak or even Amazon is one of the first huge well-known marketplaces. And what online marketplaces do is they bring together a lot of products. In this case, my products are trips from different suppliers or vendors. So my suppliers are tour operators. So what I do is I go find responsible tour operators all over the world that are completely committed to the same ideals and tenets of sustainable tourism as Yūgen Earthside. And I work with them and I say, hey, I think like we're working towards the same thing. Can we list your trips on our site? We want to become a hub for tour operators and for travelers. Like if you're interested in sustainable travel, Yūgen Earthside is where you go. And so now I've got, I'm working with almost 10 suppliers now, and we're in the process of signing a few more. So, still early stages. But so I find these suppliers and I list their trips. And so then as a traveler, if you wanted to take a sustainable trip somewhere, you would come to Yūgen Earthside. You can search for our different destinations and experiences. And these are all going to be small group trips. So most of the time less than 10 people, but maximum of 12 people. And they'll all be sustainable trips. And if you as a traveler are maybe on the fence about how much you care or want to know about sustainable travel, that is okay because we've done the research. So if you book with us, your trip will be sustainable and you don't have to stress about if you're doing the right thing or booking with a good company. But if you are interested, list the sustainability features of each trip on the listing page. So you can see what the sustainability highlights are. And you can also see how we break those down into the 3 pillars of environmental actions the company is taking, sociocultural actions, and economic actions.
I'm looking at a trip right now, and this is so cool because I think that a thing with any form of sustainability is that it's so overwhelming. It feels like, oh my gosh, I can't buy this mascara because it was tested on animals, or like they're not responsible with their plastic. There's like so many elements to consider that it can be paralyzing. And then when you think about travel, it's just like, well, I don't know that country and what they're about or what's, like anything. And so this is really cool, just what you've thought through here, and that you can, share that with people. We do not indulge in animal slavery, cruelty, or luring through bait during the wildlife experiences. Like elements like that you hear about in other countries, and you're like, oh no, like should I not go see the animals? So this is cool. Yeah, exactly.
And I did a lot of interviews, and that was, Cheryl, one thing that I did hear was that planning a trip is already pretty stressful. You don't know the language, you don't know, what the dress code is, you don't know the currency conversion. There's so many things to think about, and adding sustainability on top of that, to some people it can kind of feel like the straw that broke the camel's back. And what Yūgen Earthside is trying to do is simplify it and take out the guesswork so that you can trust the research that we're doing and feel great about your travels, and also start increasing your own awareness of like, oh, I hadn't thought about this, but this is helping it be sustainable, taking it past that environmental level that, like Ryan mentioned, most people, that'll be the first thing that they think of, but thinking about it from a more holistic manner.
Yeah. I'm also on the website looking because, and it, by the way, it's a very pretty website. It's really well done. So I'm very impressed. So I know that may or may not be important, but I find that important. To me,
Oh,
if a
yeah.
website is poorly designed, that's going to turn me off pretty quickly. So kudos to you for putting the time and effort into making your website good and user-friendly. But I also find it interesting, you've got categories. You can search by a destination or the categories that you have, which are not the typical categories that I would see on a travel website. You have beach, city, country, and mountain.
Yeah.
How did you come up with those categories?
Well, I looked at a lot of other travel websites, and I basically found there's a lot of different ways that you can organize trips. And one thing that I got from the customer interviews that we did before we launched and from customer experience testing was that right now we don't have that many trips because we're just getting started. So we wanted to make it as simple as possible for you to search for something that would give you results. So first of all, we stripped out any type of verbiage or categories that wouldn't have listings yet. So everything that you see, there will be a trip result for, at least one. The second thing is the categories that are there, they're kind of like themes, so maybe you don't know where you want to go, but you know that you want to be, beach or mountain, those are really different vibes. And then countryside, I got one question about the difference between countryside and mountain. Mountain is like trekking trip, like in the Himalayas, like mountain, whereas countryside is like our trip in Portugal where you're hiking through vineyards. It's not in a mountainous area. You're not going to have altitude sickness from that. So we try to pick big common categories that would kind of fit with the theme that people would want out of their trip.
That's really smart. I think the more we do this podcast, the more I learn how much I don't know about most of the countries in the world. And when we hear from people what it's like to visit different countries, it's like, oh my gosh, I would love to go there. I had no idea that there was a really cool beach there or a fun city or, these different aspects. So that's a really fun thought as opposed to just like, what country do you think you want to be at? But like type of experience.
I will say that like 90 to 95% of people I've spoken to, they have a destination in mind. So actually most people are not searching by that category, which is also part of why we sort of simplified it, is because it's not how people are going to start their search. They're usually going to say, I want to be, not even usually a continent level. They usually know like a country or a set of countries, and they're deciding between those countries.
I think you're right. However, again, from this podcast, especially talking to so many other people who've been to so many places I haven't been to, it's just uncovered how many places were never on my radar that once you hear about them, I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds super cool.
Yeah.
So for example, I clicked on, I think your mountain one, just because I was curious, and you've got a trip to Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, ooh, that looks cool, right? But I would never go to the search box and type Kyrgyzstan.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Like that's not a place that would come to my mind, but being able to just get ideas of cool places to go, I think especially for those of us that love not just traveling, but travel as a bigger picture of places and cultures and just learning about those places and dreaming about places we'd love to go, even if right now we're not going anywhere. I think that is super helpful too, of just getting other ideas, and whether or not I end up going to Kyrgyzstan, that may spark an idea that leads to a place that I do end up going.
Right.
So I think it's a really helpful way to
I hope
organize
it
things.
inspires people, because we really are trying to focus on more unique destinations. So, I mean, a lot of our trips, only one of our trips is in Europe. The rest are outside of Europe. So we have Eurasia, we have South Asia, and the Middle East and Africa. And ideally, I would like to have trips everywhere, and I would like to have more in Europe. But I think it's a nice way to help promote this idea of tourism dispersal, which is another thing that I'll explain for you guys, because I'm not sure if that's common wording. I don't think it is. But you might have heard of over-tourism. Cheryl, you were talking about, when places become just completely built for tourists, and like the locals are just not even there, or they're not happy, whatever. Tourism dispersal is about spreading out where tourists go and where they're spending their money. And tourism globally makes up around 10% of GDP. And of course, that's going to be slightly different for each country. But these smaller countries, your tourism dollar goes so much farther there. And when you get off the beaten path, you're probably going to have a deeper, more immersive cultural experience. And the support that you do by like taking a trip or by visiting those local restaurants or buying local products, they're really going to be sustaining people in potentially a much more, meaningful and significant way than if you went to Western Europe, because everybody goes to Western Europe. So for us promoting these unique destinations is part of our vision of spreading out where the tourists are even going in the first place.
That's so cool. That's a really good goal. And I think that when I visited places that are less traveled to, I feel like I get a better travel experience. And like, because one of my goals is I do want to see the local culture, but it's not really local culture if everyone else is a tourist. So, yeah, I think it ends up being way more enjoyable and authentic, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what does someone get if they're booking a trip through your site?
Oh, great question. The answer is it kind of depends, because I work with a lot of different tour operators, and so exactly what you get on each trip will vary slightly. But for the most part, these are trips where the cost includes the in-country transportation, accommodation, activities, and food.
Nice.
Yeah, so none of the trips will include how you get to that destination. So if you have to take a flight there, that is not included in the trip price, for maybe obvious reasons, but it's a total nightmare for tour operators or for platform companies to take on that cost of getting people to a certain location when they're coming from all over the world. And then all of the, it's a major headache. So none of the tour operators even touch that, like not even close. So that's like, that's the big, and people are also coming from different places. So the cost of getting somebody from New York to wherever versus Seattle to that same place, or even like our trip in Portugal, if you're coming from Europe, you could take a train there. You don't need to fly. So we leave it to the travelers to arrive at the destination. But aside from that big ticket thing, pretty much everything else is included. So the accommodations and the activities, the tour guides, if there's permits or entrance fees to certain parts, like especially for the trekking, a lot of times there's permits that are only handed out to a certain number of companies or travelers, per season. And then the food is mostly covered. Sometimes it's all covered, but a lot of the tour operators like to give travelers the option to go out and explore on their own for lunch or for some of the dinners. So, so basically you don't have to do a whole lot of thinking. Like all the big pieces will be planned. You will have free time on the trip. And a lot of the tour operators, because the groups are so small, they'll actually kind of adapt the exact itinerary according to what people want to do. So it's not necessarily as shown as it might look on the website, but it's more like, here's the plan. But, if it's 8 people in a tour guide, you have a lot of flexibility to kind of like spend a little bit longer in one place or go a little bit faster in another. So
that's awesome. I love that too, that someone could figure out up front if it's in their budget or not, and then not have to keep changing that based on what other costs come up or anything. Yeah, that's really cool.
We do have on our site for each trip, you can download a full list of the detailed cost inclusions and exclusions. And where a cost is excluded, I'm really pushing my tour operators to give estimates of how much that will cost, so that people can make fully informed decisions from the beginning.
Yeah, and I saw that on your listings, and I also appreciate, because oftentimes when you are trying to, whether it's to make things sustainable environmentally, or you're, trying to eat in a particular way, whatever those things are, they're usually more expensive, right? You usually are paying a premium because it's not what everybody else is doing, right? Or not the bulk of it. But, looking at the costs here and knowing that they don't include the airfare, but that they're very reasonable for traveling to, around the world to these different places. And so you maybe would tack on another $1,000 to $2,000 for a plane ticket, depending on where you are and where you're going, right? If you're traveling from the US, but especially having it be all inclusive, these are not like ridiculously high priced, or I mean, not ridiculous, but like they're not outside of what I would have expected them to be.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we're aiming for
impressive.
that. I think at some point it would be fun to have like sustainable luxury experiences, but I also am a little wary of that because I don't want sustainability to feel like a luxury. I don't want it to seem like this thing that you have to pay a lot for to stay at this, eco resort or whatever. I want it to be more accessible and approachable to people. So yeah, a lot of these, when you break down to a cost per day, I think the average is probably around 150 a day. But that's, again, for lodging, food, you don't have to think about transportation. You're getting guided tours everywhere. You get to kind of as much as you want to. Like, you can figure out what to do with your free time. And if you don't want to do that, then your guides will help you do that too. So, I think it gives like a good level of structure and flexibility.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that reminds me of sometimes if you try to eat organic, all of a sudden you're spending a lot more on food, and it feels like, oh, do I have to have a lot of money in order to eat in this whatever way I want to eat? And so, yeah, I like that idea of making it like anybody can travel in a sustainable way. So how many of these trips have you gone on?
Well, I haven't gone on any because we just started 2 weeks ago. So my next
How many of these locations have you gone to? How about that?
Locations, I've been to Portugal, but not to this region actually. I've been to India, but not the part where I have trips. So let's see, I have been to Egypt. Have not been to Eurasia. No, honestly, a lot of these are new to me. I'm gonna have a busy summer doing some quality assurance this year. So
that was my next question: is how many of these trips, do you want to go on? And no, you probably want to go on all of them because you like to travel like we like to travel. So I take it back. Which which one or two trips are the top on your list that for you as a person individually want to travel on? And then yes, the second part is what you already mentioned. How, do you get to go on some of these trips to be able to try and, make sure that, yes, I can actually tell you this trip is good because of these reasons and that sort of thing?
Okay, yes. I do want to do all of them. You're correct. Which one? Honestly,
what if there's one that she was like, I don't know, it sounds kind of lame, actually.
No. I mean, sorry, but I'm not putting any lame trips on the site. I was actually telling one of my teachers when I was like busy loading all these trips the other week, I was like, this is really distracting because I just want to do all of these. Like, it's my job right now to like load these incredible trips. I think it's hard because, I don't have kids, but these trips are kind of like my babies. Like, I know them all intimately and they're all different. And I don't think I can really pick like a favorite or what I want to do first. But what I would say is that I want to try at least one trip from each operator to see how they're functioning. So, and to see kind of like the difference, because the trips do have these like nuances. So the hiking trip in Portugal, that's bookable as long as you have 2 people. So it's a really COVID friendly trip because you're out hiking just with, your partner or your family or your quarantine pod. You can make that as small of a group trip as you want. And it's actually self-guided. So this company does all the planning for you. They tell you where to walk, how far it's going to be, which UNESCO heritage sites to go past, and they give you everything you need, but then it's actually completely independent. Whereas the tours in Eurasia, those focus on small group trips with 10 people. And this tour operator always sells out their trips. So I really want to try this because the closest thing I've done to a small group trip like this would be the yoga retreat that I did in Spain a couple of years ago. But you don't go anywhere. You're just, doing yoga all the time. So I really want to try that because it is actually new for me. Most of the time I'm just traveling with my significant other and not with strangers. So I want to see that because I think a lot of people, especially millennials like my age, they're not quite used to this idea of small group travel with strangers. And so I want to have a different from that. And then in South Asia, I have two companies there that are in India and Nepal. And I mean, like trekking through the Himalayas, isn't that like on everybody's bucket list? So, and like my operator there, they call them like wellness treks. And so they serve you like organic food every morning. And like they give you, like local herbal teas that are boosting your immune system. So also, kind of in this health mode and like COVID mindset of like nourishing your mind and body on this trail and like really rejuvenating you to go back to wherever, real life is. And then I have a trip in Kenya, which is completely different from all of those, where you're staying like with this remote village community. And I call it like adult summer camp. I don't think I put that in the listing because I wasn't sure if it was like, show enough. But you're living like, you're living in real tree houses and you're like with a local community, learning how to like climb coconut trees and canoeing down the river and learning how to build the classic thatched roofs that they have there. So it's a lot of like hands-on kind of cultural immersion. So I know this doesn't answer your question at all, but honestly, I think beyond doing at least one trip per tour operator, I don't know how I could even choose.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited for you. Congratulations. This is so
Thank
cool.
you. Yeah.
Most of the locations that you have right now, and I know you just launched, but most of the locations are definitely the off the beaten path, not your typical locations that people would be looking for. Is that sort of the vein that you would like to continue as part of that travel dispersion idea that you talked about? Or do you see at some point doing like a Paris trip or a London trip, those big places that a lot of people also look for, but doing it in a sustainable way?
Yes. Yes to everything. I'm actually already speaking with a tour operator here in Paris who does like cultural trips around Paris. So we're working on designing a trip for Paris right now, which is super fun and exciting. So we will have more of those kind of like cityscape targets. The thing is that as far as starting a business, it's a completely different approach if you're doing like a 3-day cityscape to Paris versus the 14-day trek through Nepal. Like it's completely different planning. You're catching people at different parts of their customer journey, and they're budgeting for it like very, very differently. So I do want that, but I think to start out, I'm going to be focusing more on like the longer duration trips, like 8+ days. A lot of the trips right now are actually closer to 2 weeks, and I want more trips that are a week because I know not everybody has European vacation time. So, but I'm talking to companies based in Spain and based in Iceland, and I really, really am hopeful that they'll join because they have some incredible nature experiences, especially in Iceland.
Yes.
So I do want it to be off the beaten path, but there's going to be like a merging of like where people want to go and where the trips are going to be offered. So hopefully I'll have more diversity in terms of trip durations and also locations as we progress. But another like big nugget that I've gotten from my customer interviews is that for this type of travel, people are a lot more likely to book a longer trip if they're not so familiar or comfortable with the destination. Like if the language is intimidating, if they're not sure if it's safe, if they know that they simply couldn't, like you're not going to go hike in the Himalayas by yourself. Like you're going to have a guide. So like, how can we help you find a responsible guide?
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing like with India. If you look at the Golden Triangle tour, it's like a lot of Westerners, they're scared of getting ripped off. They're scared of not getting an authentic experience. They don't want to plan. I don't know if you guys have been to India, but being on the road there is absolutely terrifying. Like travelers that feel safe and taken care of. And I think like in Western Europe, Westerners, especially from the US, Canada, English-speaking countries, you probably feel pretty comfortable planning your own trip there, even if it's a 2 or 3 week trip. But when you start talking about West Africa, you probably are like, oh my gosh, I don't really know where to start. Haven't heard much about it. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to focus on. So I think that's also part of the niche that we're trying to fill is like, where are people more likely to take these trips? And I think that kind of coincides with the more unique locations.
That's cool. I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing about your new business with us. It was so exciting to hear about that. We have a couple follow-up questions we like to ask our guests, and I'm going to tweak them a little bit. So I know that you don't want to pick which of your trips is your favorite, but we like to ask the question based on the title of our show, Take Me With You. I want to ask you if you could take us on just one of your trips. What would it be and why?
Okay. I would probably say I would do one of the small group trips in Eurasia. So maybe the Kyrgyzstan trip. But those trips, I could take you guys, but then there would also be some other new people in the mix because there's up to 10 people on those trips. And I just think that dynamic of kind of using traveling as a way of getting to know new people, make new friends while you're having these incredible experiences, would be really fun. And I have not been to that part of the world, and the food is supposed to be amazing. And that operator is just fantastic. So I'm quite
well. If you needed people to go with you to try it out and evaluate it and give you some honest feedback, I think I could think of a couple of people who would be interested.
You're on the list.
Oh man. And Hilary, you kind of answered this, but what's your next trip?
I'm going to come home as soon as I can. I miss my family.
Yeah.
So that'll be my
How long has it been since you've been home?
A year. We were back last year for Christmas. And
Okay.
yeah, I think now it's the longest that I've gone without seeing my family. So COVID has kind of been a bummer in that regard. But yeah, my very first trip will be a flight back to Seattle. And then after that, I need to do some serious strategizing to figure out how I can fit in as many of my tour operators' trips as soon as it's COVID safe as possible. So,
yay! Oh, you're gonna have so much fun. That's awesome. And do you have any travel questions for us?
Well, yes, I have lots of questions. What has been the coolest thing that you have checked off your bucket list?
Ooh.
Coolest thing to check off of my bucket list. Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is I did do a trip to Iceland a couple of years ago. You've mentioned Iceland a few times. And the very last night that we were there, we were able to see the Northern Lights. And that's obviously something you can't actually plan for because there's no way to control. But being able to see the Northern Lights was so amazing. And that's definitely one of the things that I had on my list that I wanted to do. Oh, shoot. See, now I'm thinking of all of these things. I also got to go to Australia to see a total solar eclipse.
Oh, awesome.
Also, both of which were bucket list things. So as you can see, they tend to be science related things.
Yeah.
But those are the two that I think come to mind the fastest as far as actual bucket list things.
What about you, Cheryl?
Oh gosh. I think I veer on my bucket list more towards completion of things. So I want to go to all 7 continents and all 50 states. And so I've been to 4 continents and 35 states or something. So I feel okay, I'm on my way to some of those. What else is bucket list though?
It's hard for Cheryl because she wants to do literally all of the things. Mm-hmm. So everything is on her bucket list. You tell her about one trip and she's like, yes, let's do that one. And then you tell her about a completely different trip and she'd be like, yes, let's do that one.
Yeah. Choosing is incredibly difficult because I'm I want to go everywhere. And so, I mean, a fun one for me was the last time I flew, which was a year ago. I went on my honeymoon to New Orleans. And what was fun about that was my husband and I, even when we first started dating, we were like, let's go to New Orleans and eat, because we're both foodies. And so we just talk about like, we're just going to go there and eat. And then we got to do it. And so that was a fun one of like, we talked about it for a while and daydreamed about it. And it was such an us trip that it was very fitting, you know, that we did that on our honeymoon. And so I think there's a lot of other things now that we're daydreaming of that it's like, oh, that's going to be really cool when we go and do those things. And so but, it's so hard because I want to go everywhere, absolutely everywhere. So
hence the name of the podcast.
Yep. Yes. Well, and this podcast makes it worse and worse and worse because now I know about more places. And so now the list just keeps getting longer. Like even seeing the things on your website, I'm like, okay, yeah, I would like to do all of those. And didn't even know I wanted to do some of them before.
It wasn't on the list before, but now it is. So where would be the first plane ticket that you buy? Where would you go after COVID?
Oh gosh. We had to cancel plan A of our honeymoon totally, and it was pre-COVID, but just passport stuff came up and it sucked that we had to cancel it. But it was going to be to Prague and Dresden, and I really want to still do that trip, and it was going to be right around Christmas time. So I think like I want to go do the Christmas markets in Germany, you know, and like do that trip again. And we had a lot of plans in place for it too. And so it's like, I mean, we already did the research and we already know that that's where we want to go and the time of year. So I think it just needs to be an anniversary trip. So I don't know if that's next year or the following, but like that's one I'm very excited about doing. Yeah.
Cool. Highly recommend the European Christmas market trail.
I've never been to Europe in winter, and I love Christmas so much, and I think that would be so fun to get that whole experience. Yeah. Well, now, do you think I should go there actually like on Christmas? I was just thinking Christmas time, but do you think there's an advantage to actually being in Europe like on Christmas Day itself?
I wouldn't say on Christmas Day. I mean, just like in the U.S., a lot of people are, you know, with their families. So there's not that much, I would say, happening. But in Europe, they don't have, obviously, American Thanksgiving as a holiday. And so basically, as soon as they're done with Halloween, they start going into like light Christmas mode. And so it starts trickling in with the decorations and all the advertisements during November. And then kind of our Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Thanksgiving weekend, that is the same weekend that a lot of the European Christmas markets will start. And so that is kind of like the true beginning of the Christmas season. So, you know, I think every culture likes to have something to look forward to. And it's really entertaining to me that we live above a McDonald's, and literally October 31st, they had their Christmas trees lit up outside. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so.
I mean, I feel like that's the States as well, is just like Christmas mode right after.
Definitely needing
but we also just
forward to.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Christmas here is so fun, but I think you probably capture more of it in late November, early December, when you can see the Christmas market. And especially if you have the opportunity to see a few different Christmas markets in different regions, because the local specialties, the food, the drinks, like everything will be a little bit different. And if you go to Christmas markets that are in towns that are really close to each other, you're going to see a lot of the same stuff. But if you go to ones in different countries, then you really start to see how localized the Christmas festivities can be. And I think that's like, it's just a very joyous experience.
I love it. Cool. Well, I think it needs to be an anniversary trip. We're December 8th, so that sounds like perfect timing. Yeah. Yay. It's going to happen. Ryan, what's your first ticket? I mean, you have a ticket booked for February that we talk about too much on this podcast, but
I do, and I mean, now that we're post Christmas, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah,
I don't think it's going to be worth it. I mean, even if things are open, and talking with my sister, it's Hilary, what you're missing is my sister lives in LA, and so I was down there visiting her in February of 2020. So about a month before everything shut down in the US for COVID.
And they all got sick.
And we all got sick.
Disneyland.
I don't know that it was COVID. However, some of the symptoms do line up with it, but we had different symptoms at different times. So I'm not sure what the deal is. The point is, it was a trip that we had all these great plans for, and it didn't happen the way we planned it because we all got sick at different times. And so we talked about doing a redo trip. And we were going to do the redo trip this February because somehow we all seemed to think that even in June that COVID was going to be over soon. And now in retrospect, that seems ridiculous. But at the time, it didn't seem that ridiculous. Oh. So I don't think that's going to happen. But I'm also not sure that that's going to be my next trip because I don't know when that's going to happen. Because I think part of making it the redo trip was we were supposed to do Disneyland together. Disneyland, I do not think will be open until summer at the very earliest, probably like mid to late summer, more realistically, I'm guessing, before enough vaccinations and all that sort of thing. So I don't actually know what my next trip will be. So I don't know, which is not very fun or exciting, but it's the real answer.
We still have options. Room for spontaneity.
There you go.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and move on to the last part of our podcast called Wish You Were Here. During this segment, each of the three of us is going to highlight a cool travel attraction from the places that we've been before. It's kind of like a little postcard that has a snapshot that says, hey, here's this really cool place. We wish you were here. Cheryl, what would you like to do for your Wish You Were Here?
Well, I'm so excited about this one. I think you're both going to be into it. It is a restaurant. But Ryan, breakfast is what you want to get there.
Yes.
Okay, so.
Yes, I'm on board.
Ryan's not always a foodie, or not usually a foodie, but he does love breakfast foods.
I do love
Hilary,
breakfast
have
food.
you been to Bainbridge Island?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I went there. When was it? On Thanksgiving, because we canceled our Thanksgiving plans, so we got an Airbnb on Bainbridge Island, and we went to this little breakfast place called the Madison Diner. And it's pretty close to like their cute little downtown area with the shops and restaurants and everything. It's not in the heart of it, but it's like a couple blocks away from everything else. It's in a train car. So
Ooh.
I love a dining experience. I love a weird atmosphere or just like different, I don't know, than normal. And so, it's fun. Since we were eating there during COVID times, they had a tent outside with like heaters and a covered area and the walls and everything. So you could just look at the train car, but not be in the train car, which is so funny. But their food is so good. I think I had crab Benedict, like eggs Benedict with crab in it, which it was amazing. And then my husband got this like pork belly hash thing that was really yummy too. And they have like fun breakfast cocktails and really good service. And so I think it's just like I would definitely recommend it. And they're just breakfast, which is fun.
The website says breakfast and then brunch Fridays through Sundays.
And it was so good, and you get to be in a train car. So I would definitely recommend it.
Cheryl, the website also says they have party space.
Ooh.
You could do a party
in a
train car diner.
Also, what's really fun is instead of an after dinner mint, since it's breakfast time, because they squeeze their own orange juice. So then they candy the orange peels. And so you get a candied orange peel as your little like end of meal
fun.
Little treat. And that inspired me to make them for Christmas. So I made a bunch of candied orange peels and they were great. It was also super easy. But it was a fun like not Christmas cookie thing to make, so just to mix it up a little
Nice.
bit.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hilary, what would you like to do for your wish you were here?
Oh, my wish you were here. There is this place called the Matson des Îles, which is French for the island of Matson. And this is in Nantes, France, which is on the northwestern kind of coast, not quite on the coast, but close. And the latitude is actually very similar to Seattle. So, yeah, kind of a similar vibe in terms of weather. But this Matson des Îles, we went this summer, and it's kind of this world that they're building out of all of these mechanical things. So they're building mechanical trees, mechanical herons that can fly, a huge mechanical elephant that like walks around and like sprays out of its trunk. It is absolutely crazy. I've never seen anything like it. And it's like Nantes used to be a very, very industrial town. And because of that, it wasn't really known for, well, not because of that, but it hasn't really been known for tourism. And they've been trying to change that. And Jules Verne, the author, who you guys might recognize from, Around the World in 8 Days and a bunch of other books, he was born in Nantes. And so this museum is like, you walk through it and it's just incredible. So they're trying to kind of blend features of Nantes' industrial past with inspiration from Jules Verne, with other inspiration from Leonardo da Vinci. And we took this quick little train trip to Nantes this summer because we couldn't really go far because there was new restrictions just kind of coming out of left and right field all year. So we didn't want to go far. This was just a quick train, and we didn't do any research. We're like, we're just going to wing it. And we got there, and we were like, what is this place? And it was just so freaking cool. So we got to use remote controls and help navigate some of the mechanical animals and watch them take the elephant for a walk. And it is so freaking cool. You have to look it up. It's called Matson des Îles, Island of the Machines, and it is so unique. And that's what I want.
I'm looking at their website right now. That looks amazing. That looks so cool.
It's so
it looks
unique.
like a movie.
Yeah, it feels like one. It's just the way that they've done it. You walk through these trees and this gallery, and they have sloths. They have this huge mechanical spider, which is really creepy but also really cool. And oh man, it is really, it's just something super unique that I've never seen anywhere else, and it seems kind of random. And they're really doing it to help boost Nantes as a tourist destination, while also kind of paying homage to the industrial past and Jules Verne being born there. So really, really cool.
So
wow.
Cool. That's
so when
cool.
you eventually do your France trip with your business, are you going to send people there?
It's too far for a day trip, so it would have to be a different trip, but I would love to. But I think that would have to be part of a Brittany regional tour, which would be separate from kind of a Paris area tour.
Oh,
Wow.
That's super cool.
Okay, so it looks like Google Maps is saying it's like a 2.5-hour train ride.
Yeah. So just a single train ride, no transfers.
That's not bad.
All the train tickets were 100% refundable in France because of COVID. So we were like, well, we'll book this. We'll get our little apart hotel so we can just stay by ourselves and make most of our food and eat out once a day and see if it gets canceled or not. And it didn't get canceled, so we went and had a great time.
That's
That's
cool.
really cool.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. I've just put a want to go there flag on it in Google Maps, so it's on my list.
That's how you know it's real. He's committed. Oh my goodness, so cool. Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, so mine is not gonna sound that cool when I first describe it, but it's actually pretty cool. So it's a clock in Bern, Switzerland. And it actually has a fancy German name that I will totally mispronounce, but it's something like the Zeitgogel, which is a super fun name. But it's this big clock in the middle of Bern, which is the capital city of Switzerland. And it's sort of an astronomical / astrological clock that has all sorts of circles within circles that move around. And then on the hour, there's all of these, think of it kind of like a giant cuckoo clock in a sense, where there's different figures that like come out and make sounds and move and do all of these really cool things. And it's really, really fun to just kind of to see it, even when it's not moving, to just kind of look at it and look at the intricacies and to realize that it was made hundreds of years ago and is still running and working. And it's just, I don't know. I find it really, really fun. And then, I was looking at my photos from when I was there just to make sure that I'm not going crazy. But what I'm remembering then is underneath it. So you can kind of walk underneath it. There's just like a hallway that goes underneath it. And underneath it, there's just some like random things like affixed to the wall. They're just metal bars. And here, I'm going to go ahead, and this isn't going to be super helpful for our listeners, but I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you two so that you can sort of see it. Let me do this one here. And it's a little weird, but they're just these metal bars that are stuck onto the side of the wall. And there's no plaque. There's no description that I could find. But in looking at it, I believe what those were standards of measure.
Huh.
And so like, I think one of those is a meter. And then the other ones are different standards of measure over time. And so like how would you know like how long a meter is? You needed something that was the standard that you could make all of your other ones based on. And I'm pretty sure that that's what a lot of those actually are. So I found that really, really cool as a huge fan of the metric system. And it's just this random, like, again, it's underneath the clock. You just walk through and it's just affixed there. So
that's awesome.
So there you go.
Weird.
Yeah, totally random little thing that you wouldn't necessarily know a ton about, but there it is. That's my wish you were here.
Cool. I love
Great.
those tidbits.
It kind of reminds me, in Edinburgh, there's the Royal Mile, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
it's not a mile how we're used to it because they measured miles differently, like it wasn't standardized. And it's like a trick question that our little walking tour guide gave us. They're like, how long do you think the Royal Mile is? We're like, okay, well, obviously it's not a mile. So I don't remember if it's longer or shorter. I just remember that it's different, and it's because it took time for all these measurements to become standardized. And then the U.S. still something different. So.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other issue. But yeah, interesting. That's cool.
Hilary, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. Go ahead and plug your business one more time so people can find you and follow you.
Yes. So we are called Yūgen Earthside. That is spelled Yugen Earthside. Yūgen Earthside, all one word. That's our handle on every social media. So you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, even TikTok. And we finally got our Pinterest boards up and running. So we are everywhere. And we have great tips on our website for you to come check out now at YūgenEarthside.com. You just send a contact us message to start booking a trip, and we will help you out. And yeah, you can also subscribe to our newsletter, which we send once a month for company updates and featured trips. So lots of ways to get in touch with us and stay in tune with our journey. And we hope to see you soon.
Awesome. Yes. And I would encourage you all to go and look at the website. Like I mentioned, it's a well-designed website.
Yeah.
It's got lots of really exciting trips on it. And it looks like you also have some free resources on the website as well. Is that correct?
We do. We didn't really jump into all this, but we have a lot of resources, whether it's about sustainable travel or about how travelers can mitigate or offset their climate impact. We even have some resources for tour operators. So there's a lot of different things that you can use to get more acquainted with sustainable travel in general. So,
nice.
Yeah, it's all there. And another
Great.
thing that we actually didn't talk about, but a really important part of the business is our giving back model. So we have something on our page called Impact Projects, and we will be donating a percentage of profits to sustainable tourism development projects that are in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So as a startup, we don't have profits yet, but this is part of our long-term plan, is that we consider ourselves a for-profit social enterprise. So we are going to try to make this a viable business, obviously, but the bigger goal is so that we will have profits that we can donate to help the tourism industry regenerate and stay sustainable in the long term. So
that's so great.
That's great. Yeah.
I work for a
Wonderful.
nonprofit, so that's really important to have organizations that are on board with our mission and giving to it. So that's awesome that you have that as part of your model.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm taking a quiz on your website right now to see how much I know about sustainable tourism. It's a little harder than BuzzFeed quizzes, turns out.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, after you're done checking out Yūgen Earthside, we would love it for you to follow us on social media as well. We are at Timwy Podcast. That's TMWY for Take Me With You Podcast on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
You can also email us at timwypodcast@gmail.com. Send us suggestions of guests we could have on that are doing interesting things in travel, or send us questions and maybe share with us the most, maybe share with us the most off the beaten path trip that you've taken that we should be aware of, because everyone knows my list needs to get longer. So
you could also call us and leave us a voicemail at 406-763-8699, or another way to remember that is 406-POD-TIMWY. We would really appreciate it if you would rate and review our podcast to tell other people what you think about it. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss any episodes, and share about this episode on social media so that more people can hear about Yūgen Earthside and the awesome travel opportunities that Hilary's new company is providing.
as always, thank you to Beth Reed Miller for her awesome artwork. You can check out more of Beth's artwork at Beth Is Something. And thank you to Erica Corbin for the use of her song Round the Globe. You can listen to Erica's music wherever music is sold or streamed.
Hilary, it has been awesome talking with you today. Thank you so much for taking the time and working through the whatever 8 or 9 hour time difference to make it all work today.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This was a great first podcast experience.
Oh, yay.
Wonderful. Well, that's it for this episode. So until next time, remember to take me with you.
Take me with you.
Can we get a sailboat chasing down the sunset as we float round and round the globe? Salty air and balmy nights, guided only by the lights above, and a little love. Oh, the world is out there waiting to explore, and all our troubles here want them to be